You may not have read about it in your high school history books. It certainly wasn't covered in mine, but you can find the true story of the decades-long FBI program to undermine the fight for civil rights on display in the latest production at Arts Emerson. COINTELShow takes a satirical look at COINTELPRO, that is short for Co-Intelligence Program. That's the FBI's covert and illegal operation aimed at discrediting and neutralizing figures like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Hampton, and organizations like the Black Panther Party.
My name is Special Agent Christian White. You can call me Chris. I'm with the Public Relations Subdivision of the FBI.
In COINTELShow, the fictional Agent White takes the audience on a tour of the program's most dark and duplicitous tactics. I'm joined now by the show's creator, L.M. Bogad, who is also a professor of political performance at UC Davis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thanks for having me.
So talk to me about the concept for this show, because, it's a topic that a lot of folks don't necessarily know about. And it also does something very unique on stage and in a virtual space as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's based on the actual nonfiction texts, the documents that were declassified by the FBI about these programs. So programs that were designed, in their own words, to disrupt the activities of social movement organizations. So it is a satire. It is, there's some grim humor in the piece, but it does have humor to help us to deal with this very grim history.
And so is the idea, I imagine the idea is to both educate and entertain, but is it education first and then entertainment as you go, or how is the design there?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the key question.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's like the way I was taught, if you're not entertaining folks, you're sinking. It's not going to work. And so it is entertainment first. And there's a lot of humor there. There's some surprises. The documents themselves are surprising. In some ways, unintentionally, the FBI wrote a lot of comedy. It's not the kind of comedy I would choose, but sometimes what they were doing was so unfortunate that you just have to laugh. And sometimes you have to take a situation seriously enough to laugh at it. And that's the approach with this show. It's all based in fact, but it takes you on a journey. The script is designed to take you on a journey through these documents and also to reflect on, well, what would I have done if these tactics were used on me? And how can we, to be productive, how can we resist these kinds of divide and conquer tactics? So hopefully to just make people more aware of the possibility of these misdeeds.
Talk to me about the research process for a show like this, because I imagine it's intensive and probably took a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, in fact, as I was researching COINTELPRO, was very interesting. A lot of documents had come out in one way or another. And frankly, I had been involved in some creative, nonviolent, very peaceful activist groups that had been spied on and had been infiltrated in some cases. And we were like, what was that about? And this is after the time of actual COINTELPRO. But that got me interested in the subject matter. And then as I started to read these documents from the 60s and 70s, and even the 50s in some cases, I was like, oh, this explains the pattern. And we have to be careful. The question of who watches the watchmen is never going to go away. As people in a society that is trying to preserve our democracy and our civil society, we're always going to have to ask those questions and do our homework in that sense. So for myself, it was my personal experience, and then also reading up on the documents and trying to find the patterns. And some of the patterns I found were absolutely about divide and conquer, sadly making people suspect each other instead of trust each other to disrupt movements. And then I found one document that was released in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. So they're like, okay, we got to release this, but they had redacted or blacked out every single word. And then they released it in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. And I said, okay, I've got a show. Now I've got, because that's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in a way that teaches us something. And for those of you who come to the show, that completely redacted or censored document is one of the stars of the show.
So I'm thoughtful about how you chose maybe the folks or the subjects of that are in the show. We know Dr. Martin Luther King was surveilled. I'm thinking about Malcolm X. We talked about Fred Hampton from the Black Panther Party. I know about, actors and actresses that were surveilled. I mean, how do you choose from this plethora of very interesting and high-profile folks that we know were surveilled by the federal government?
It's a great question. Thanks, Crystal. It's very hard, especially for a piece that's not going to be 17 hours. You know, I'm a big believer in we're not trying to do with a theater play what an essay would do or a full-length 300-page book, right? So you've got to pick some folks that really give you an idea of the scope of these programs without trying to tell every story. So yes, Dr. King was absolutely targeted by J. Edgar Hoover, as we now know from some commercial films that have come out, right? Which is great, that showed how Hoover was obsessed with King not in a good way. And that was really unfortunate. And so we definitely spent some time with Dr. King on this. And then unfortunately, Fred Hampton, this very young leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, who was killed. And so these are important aspects of American history. We have to be grown-ups and face it, and I think those were some of the reasons why I picked some examples. And then I hope it inspires folks after seeing this short and, again, grimly entertaining play that does have humor with it. Well, then go and check it out for yourself. It's not hard to learn more anymore. Now you can go online and you can find out a lot. So fill out your knowledge after seeing the show.
Ellen, we actually have a clip from the show I want to play for folks, if we can insert that here.
Here's one we wrote as if from a union worker to a union boss to get the Teamsters, and more importantly, any gangsters they might know, up in arms against the Communist Party of America. I'm afraid these commies mean business, so watch out. Thanks to use of a free copy machine, I can get the word out about this. Don't let the commies take over.
So talk to me about this clip having to do with the Teamsters and the Communist Party of America, supposedly.
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Bruce France, the wonderful actor, and Mondo Bizarro, my dear friends of the theater company that done this, and Arts Emerson for hosting and producing the show. I'm very grateful. But that is a very real campaign that Hoover approved called Operation Hoodwink. Which is an unfortunate pun, and they were trying to get to encourage through anonymous letters to encourage members of Cosa Nostra to take action against members of the Teamsters, which is not what our tax money should be paying for, and to go after members of the Communist Party who were working with and within the Teamsters, I should say, to be more specific. The Communist Party wasn't, we now know, as much of a threat as they made it out to be. It was a very small group of people, some of whom, or quite a large number of whom, were FBI agents that were infiltrators. Nevertheless, Hoover was encouraging through these anonymous letters sent by FBI, its original creative writing by FBI authors who maybe should have tried to write their own, novels or something outside of security work, but they were written and then received by members of the Teamsters who were believed to be connected to gangsters, to encourage them to get violent with members of this Communist Party, this little small party that we had. This is really unfortunate, and it's not the kind of activity I would hope the state would be sponsoring with our tax money.
This show is a live virtual format. And so how was it different in terms of, staging, but also giving audiences that experience?
Yeah, I mean, we encourage folks to discuss and converse in the chat and respond to what's happening. Of course, there's conversation after the show, but even beforehand, I don't want to give anything away, but there's an interactive series of chat rooms on the Zoom where you can meet the special agent, you can talk to each other. You're asked to surveil each other. Please be compliant and surveil other members of the audience. And so we're having fun with it, and we're being tongue-in-cheek, but we're referring to actual practices where people are encouraged to be divided against each other, unfortunately. So that's the idea. In the live performance, this is a Zoom-only show. In the live performance, we do similar types of activities to, again, have a little bit of fun with it. But in the on the way into the show, you might be processed by an agent in the lobby before you can get in, and they might ask you some personal questions you don't want to answer. before you can get into the theater. That kind of a thing where you have to make a choice between convenience or being delayed. Either I give you some personal information, or it takes longer to get into the theater. I know this sounds annoying, but we're trying to have a little bit of fun with audience members before they go in. So again, that's the type of thing we do in the live show. The Zoom show, we want to give a playful experience that does refer to the idea that we live in a surveillance society, and we should be aware of that and the trade-offs that come from convenience versus having privacy.
Well, education, entertainment, virtual options. Seems like this show has it all. L.M. Bogat, I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Appreciate it.
COINTEL Show is running now through March 12th. You can find tickets for the live virtual performance at artsemerson.org.